electrofusion processor, also known as a control box, is a highly sensitive and sophisticated piece of equipment. As such, a strict adherence to specified guidelines must be followed for the machine to perform at maximum potential. Many of the problems associated with processor malfunction can be traced back to the power supply. In this video, we will address types of power supply, their recommended maintenance, and the proper operating procedures required for Electrofusion electrofusion processors to work as intended. The AC power required to operate our electrofusion processors is supplied by one of two sources: through professionally wired in-house industrial-grade wall receptacles, or a well-maintained and adequately sized portable AC generator. Regardless of the source, the electrofusion process is completely dependent on the ability of that power source to deliver a constant, uninterrupted flow of AC current to the processor. In considering the first option, as long as the receptacle powering the unit has been professionally wired and meets the specified requirements of the processor, this should supply the steady current necessary for proper function. If the electrofusion processor is going to be plugged into a portable AC generator, however, whether in the shop or in the field, the following considerations must be noted. Make sure the generator in use is properly maintained and calibrated. The physical condition of the generator is important. Regular oil changes, air filter replacement, and tune-ups all impact a generator's performance and should be maintained per the manufacturer's recommendations. Moreover, the voltage output and frequency signal of the generator should be tested annually to ensure that it is properly calibrated. Operating a generator involves more than just turning it on and plugging in an electrofusion processor. There are required safeguards and sequences that must be followed in an electrofusion application. Only dedicated portable or single-purpose generators can be used as a power source for the electrofusion processor. The generator must be adequately sized for the job, and it must be able to provide a continuous wattage output that is appropriate for the voltage and amperage requirements of the electrofusion processor being used and with the size of the fitting being installed. A generator with no less than 5,000 continuous watts is required when using Electrofusion's iFuse 60 processor to install couplers 16 inches and smaller, and no less than 6,500 continuous watts when using the iFuse 105 processor when installing all electrofusion fittings, particularly couplers that are larger than 16 inches. When selecting a generator, pay close attention to the generator's output capacity. There is a noteworthy difference in a generator's rated capacity as opposed to its peak capacity. Always go by the lower of the two stated capacities. The generator must be equipped with the appropriate receptacles and breakers for that specific processor. Electrofusion offers two types of electrofusion processors, each with their own specific power requirements. For the 110-volt iFuse 60 units, a 120-volt 30-amp power source that is equipped with a 3-prong NEMA L530 120-volt 30-amp twist-lock receptacle is required. If you're using the 240-volt iFuse 105 unit, the installer will need a 240-volt 30-amp power source that has a 4-prong NEMA L1430 240-volt 30-amp twist-lock receptacle. Use of any kind of plug adapter or pigtail is not allowed, as they will impede voltage and current inputs being supplied to the processor, resulting in a fusion error. At no time is it acceptable to hardwire or direct wire the processor to the generator. At times it may be necessary to use an extension cord at the fusion site. If an extension cord is required, the installer must adhere to the following guidelines. 25-foot extension cords must be made of 10-gauge wire, and 50-foot extension cords must be made of 8-gauge wire. Make sure that the generator's fuel gauge reflects a full tank prior to beginning the fusion process. It is also recommended to have extra fuel on hand. The generator must be powered on before plugging in the Electrofusion processor. Never turn the generator off with the processor engaged. Once the generator is running, if it is a model that has a manual throttle or choke lever, make sure that the throttle is in the full throttle position. After plugging the processor into the generator, but before turning the processor on, check that the correct breakers are turned on so that the proper voltage will be supplied to the outlet being used. Some generators can supply both 120 volts or 240 volts to the same outlet, simply by turning on or turning off an additional breaker. If the breakers are turned on incorrectly, the Electrofusion processor can be seriously damaged. With the generator running and the correct breakers flipped on, make sure that the idle control switch, also called econ switch, economy mode, or governor control switch, is in the off position. If this switch is in the on position, the generator will not operate in a constant full throttle mode. Although there are features common to most generator models, it is worth noting that not all generators are the same. Knowing your particular model of generator and its compatibility with the Electrofusion processor you are using is imperative. Whatever the specifics, by adhering to guidelines for proper generator maintenance and operation, along with a better understanding of the power needs required for your Electrofusion processor, the user can minimize errors and ensure a smoother fusion process. Integrity Fusion products, where molded makes a difference.